Federal Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland is speaking to reporters following a meeting with her provincial counterparts. Let's listen in live.
The financial reality for a province that decides to withdraw from the CPP. And that's why I told ministers today that I would ask the chief actuary to provide an estimate of the asset transfer based on a reasonable interpretation of the provisions in the CPP legislation. Our officials will work together to define the precise taskings for this work. One of the other points that I raised in our meeting, and that was raised by many other ministers, was the issue of portability. The CPP allows Canadians to live and work anywhere in Canada without jeopardizing their retirement. Many ministers spoke personally in this meeting. They talked about their own lives living and working across Canada, and they talked about the lives of members of their family and how portability had been really important. If Alberta were to withdraw from the CPP, the federal government would need to issue a regulation recognizing comparability with the CPP, and Alberta would need to negotiate complex, time-consuming portability agreements with the CPP and with the Quebec pension plan. Furthermore, if Alberta were to choose to leave, the government of Alberta would also need to negotiate international social security agreements to ensure similar treatment of contributors who spend part of their careers abroad. As an example, Quebec has negotiated its own social security agreements with 39 countries, and Canada has negotiated with 60. This would be a complex and multi-year process, and it would be taking place at a time of real uncertainty, geopolitical uncertainty, global economic uncertainty around the world. I truly believe, as Deputy Prime Minister and as Finance Minister of Canada, that adding to that uncertainty right now is not something that would help Albertans or any Canadians. Because at the end of the day, this conversation is all about the well-being and the financial security of all Canadians. Since the CPP was founded nearly 60 years ago, no province has ever left. This action is unprecedented. It would be very complicated, and it would come at a time of great uncertainty and complexity. Protecting the pensions of every single Canadian is a priority for our government. We will always stand up for the Canada Pension Plan and for the secure and dignified retirement it provides to all Canadians, a point I made clear in today's meeting. This is just the beginning of a national conversation, and I expect to meet with my ministerial counterparts in person in the coming weeks. Thank you, and I'm happy to take your questions.
It'll be one question, one follow-up. Bienvenue à la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui. Ce sera une question et une question en suivi. Merci. Thank you.
Hi, Ms. Freeland. Mackenzie Gray with Global News. Opposition parties in Alberta have been saying essentially they think Ms. Smith's proposal on the pension reform is a political stunt, an ability to try and extort more out of Ottawa, and that they don't actually want to leave. From your conversations today, do you think the Alberta government is actually serious in going through with this?
I am not going to speak for the Alberta government. It's for the Alberta government to state its own position. What I will say is yesterday I had the chance to speak to the head of the Calgary Chamber of Commerce, and she told me, as the Chamber has said publicly, about the Chamber's very real concerns about this effort. I met just this morning with Gil McGowan, the head of the Alberta Federation of Labour, and he also reiterated to me his very serious concerns. So I am hearing directly from Albertans about their concerns with this effort. I take that seriously.
The report that the Alberta government commissioned saying $330 billion could potentially be coming to them, do you think that is a realistic number? I know you've got the chief actuary looking at that, but just ballpark, do you think that is a realistic number that the pension plan could potentially have to give to Alberta if they left?
No, I do not.
All right, next question, prochaine question.
Judy Turn with CTV News. Minister, do you think, what can you tell us about your relationships with the provinces, given the fact that the Alberta Premier wants to withdraw from CPP, given the fact that the Premier of Saskatchewan wants to stop paying the carbon tax on home heating, given the fact that the Premier of Ontario today has called out your government in terms of being divisive in regards to the carbon tax? So why would you agree with that your policies, that this government is dividing the country and that your affordability measures do not impact each region of the country fairly?
No, I would not agree with that at all. And I'm glad you mentioned the Premier of Ontario. The Premier and I developed a very good working relationship during COVID. I speak to him often. I spoke to him just last weekend. Clearly, there are areas of disagreement between governments in this country. That's normal. What's really important is that we are able to sit down together and work together to address issues of mutual concern that matter to Canadians. And there was disagreement at today's meeting, but the important thing was we were all there. We were all able to have a conversation. That's what Canada's about. And that is the approach I really, really believe in taking.
We've submitted a question towards your communications department that has not been fully answered for 2 days, specifically about penalties when it comes to not paying the carbon tax on home heating. Is there, even though that threat exists from Premier Scott Moe, that he will stop collecting those carbon fees, what can the federal government do to prevent that from him acting unilaterally? Will the province, will anyone incur penalties? Will there be fees or perhaps even jail time?
The federal government expects everyone in Canada to obey the law. Canada is the country of peace, order, and good government. I think that's something all Canadians believe in. That's something we expect.
Next question, prochaine question.
Bonjour, Madame la Ministre. D'abord, sur votre réunion sur
Meeting.
donc, les problèmes de plan de pension, est-ce que vous avez senti le
With
support
the
des
pension.
autres ministres des Finances, des ministres des autres provinces? À quel point
What have you heard from the other premiers? To what extent are they supporting Alberta?
Je pense
Alberta.
que c'est plutôt une question pour les
I think it's
ministres,
more
ce
of
n'est
a
pas pour moi,
question for the
de
premiers,
parler
and
pour
it's not
chaque
for me
ministre.
to speak for
Mais,
each minister.
Je pouvais
But
vous dire
I
que
could tell you that
la question du régime de pension, c'est une
The
question qui touche
pension plan
chaque Canadien
issue
et Canadienne.
is an
Et c'est
issue
pour
that
cette
affects
raison
all
que tous les
Canadians.
ministres
And
étaient
this is
là.
why all
Et
ministers were
je
there.
pense
And I
que
think
c'est
that
pour eux d'exprimer leur point
it's
de
up
vue,
to
mais je
them
pense que
to
je
explain
pourrais me
their
permettre
point
de
of
dire
view,
que
but I could
chaque
allow myself to
ministre
say that each
comprend
minister
l'importance d'une offre
understands the
de pension.
importance of our
Chaque
pension
ministre
plan.
comprend l'importance
All the ministers understand the
de la
importance of
sécurité des Canadiens.
for
Une
the
ministre,
security of Canadians.
peut-être même deux ministres, ont
Perhaps two of them
dit que
said that
notre système de soins de santé
our
et
system
notre régime
and
de
the
pension
healthcare and
sont
our pension
les
plan
deux pierres
are the two
angulaires de la sécurité
cornerstones
des Canadiens.
of Canadian security. And I agree with that.
Et on
It's
comprend
true.
que certains ministres auraient voulu
And why
parler
would
de la taxe
some-
carbone durant cette rencontre. Certains ministres disent, ben, écoutez,
Or
nous,
did some of them want to talk about the
actuellement, le
carbon
gouvernement
tax?
ne traite pas les provinces de façon égale. Quelle réponse leur avez-vous donnée?
It doesn't seem like the federal government is treating provinces equally. How do you answer that? Some of them feel it's
Une
unfair.
conversation ciblée sur
It
la
was
question
a
des pensions.
conversation targeted on the issue
Je
of
pense
pensions.
que tous les
And
Canadiens et
I
Canadiennes
think that
seront
all
d'accord
Canadians
avec l'idée que
will agree
on pourra,
with the idea that
donner 1 heure de notre temps pour discuter la sécurité.
we could give an hour of our
Ce
time
n'est pas trop.
to discuss
Parce que c'est
our
vraiment
pension
un
plan.
enjeu
It's not too much
chacun
because
de nous.
it is truly an issue that
Le
affects
but
all of us.
de cette réunion spéciale du début était
The goal of this
de
special
discuter le
meeting
régime de pension.
from the
On
beginning
était
was
très clair
to
de ça.
discuss
On a
the
convoqué la
pension
réunion
plan. We were very clear on
à
that.
cause de la
We
lettre
called
que
the
le ministre
meeting
ontarien m'a écrit et
because
il a demandé
of a letter
une
that the
réunion
Premier of
spéciale pour
Ontario,
discuter le
who
régime de
sent me,
pension. C'était
he
le
wanted
thème
a
de cette,
special meeting for the
réunion
pension
et je
plan.
pense que c'est
And that was the purpose of this
pas
meeting.
seulement
And I
très
think that
normal, c'est approprié d'avoir
not
une
only
réunion
very
spéciale.
normal, it's appropriate to hold a special meeting
On aura en décembre une
targeted
réunion
on this matter.
des ministres
And in December, we'll
des
have
finances fédérales et territoriales avec le
a
ministre fédéral et on pourra
meeting
discuter
with the
les
finance
enjeux
ministers of the provinces, territories, with the
territoires qui
federal,
sont
and discuss all issues that are
afternoon,
important
Rita
for the
Von Sackler
provinces,
from
territories,
CBC
and for the
News.
federal
Will there
government.
be any further exemptions to the carbon tax on home heating?
No.
Straight no, no future of that. Okay. My follow-up question, I wanted to follow up on what my,
Sorry, one question, one follow-up.
that's just a clarity.
It's one question, one follow-up. It's one question, one follow-up, I'm sorry.
I'm hoping that I can ask my second question because I just wanted the clarity on that.
I'm so sorry, it's one question, one follow-up.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
Thank
It's
you.
fine.
Thank you. My follow-up question is, we are hearing, as you know, that the Saskatchewan government is threatening to stop collecting the carbon tax. We're hearing that the New Brunswick government is also looking at legal options. I want to follow up on my colleague's question here. What would the Liberal government do? Would there be fines? Would there be legal action if that happens?
It is entirely appropriate, and I think an expectation shared by all Canadians, that everyone in the country should follow the law. That's our expectation, and it's our job to ensure that the law is enforced. It will be.
Thank you.
Next question, prochaine question.
Hi, Minister Rafi Mijikani on CBC Radio. I'm wondering, I heard you say, it was a targeted meeting. Nevertheless, 5 provinces wanted to talk about the carbon tax today. It seems like you did not engage them on it. Would it really have been impossible to at least talk about this a little bit when it's a discussion that's seizing the whole country and not wait till December?
Today's meeting was called in response to a letter that I thought was very appropriate sent to me by the Ontario Minister of Finance. He believed, and I agreed, that the CPP and the pensions of all Canadians are an absolutely central issue for the security of every single person in Canada. And I would add, at this time of tremendous instability around the world, it's especially important for Canadians to know that their governments across the country take their pension security seriously. I believe that that's why the Ontario Finance Minister wrote me a letter asking me to call a special meeting. I agreed with him. I called a special meeting. Ministers came to attend the meeting specifically because of that invitation to discuss that subject. And, when I think about Canadians, when I think about my own constituents, I don't think an hour is too much time for this group of ministers who are uniquely charged with protecting the pension security of Canadians to spend devoted to this central and essential issue. I absolutely recognize that there are a lot of different issues that provinces and territories across the country are interested in. And that's why we have an annual federal provincial finance ministers meeting that will be happening next month. And I look forward to working with ministers on the agenda.
Okay. Nevertheless, Ontario Premier Doug Ford did suggest that the carbon tax should have been on the agenda today. He said so publicly, and now we've got New Brunswick mulling a legal opinion about whether or not they could get out of collecting the carbon tax. Do you have any political allies left in this fight?
We have a lot of political allies in the country. When it comes to the relationship between provinces and the federal government, that can be challenging. I was Intergovernmental Affairs Minister during COVID, and that has left me with two convictions about the relationship between the federal government and provinces and territories across the country. One is, it's really hard work. Canada is a huge and diverse country, and different provinces and territories have different perspectives, different interests, different needs. My second really profound conviction is Canada works when we are able to sit around a table to talk candidly about the issues where we disagree, about the issues where we agree, to try to make progress and advance the issues where we agree, and to be candid about our disagreements. That's the approach that I believe in taking. It can be hard, it can be frustrating. There is no unanimity ever in our vast and diverse country, but I do believe that on the most important issues, at the end of the day, we always do find a way to work together. And actually, today's meeting was very encouraging for me in that respect, that everyone came together. There were clearly some differences around the table, but we were able to listen to each other and agree to keep on working at it.
All right, next question. Prochaine question.
Good afternoon, Minister. Mark Ramsey with the Toronto Star. If the chief actuary's numbers don't align with Alberta's claim that they'd be owed 53% of the CPP in an exit, as you have predicted, what will Ottawa's next steps be?
One thing I learned during the NAFTA negotiations is to never answer hypothetical questions. This is a complicated process. This possibility, which is being mooted, that one province might leave the CPP, is posing brand new questions for our whole country. This has never happened before. That's why it's going to be really, really important to have a calm, fact-based conversation. It's really important to recognize that this issue is about Alberta's decision, and Alberta has the right to make its choice, but that it is an issue that involves and touches on every single Canadian. So we need a truly national discussion about this, and that's why it was important to have a special meeting devoted to this issue with all the provinces and territories represented. And it's going to be important for us to take it step by step by step, to be very careful, thoughtful, and fact-based, and to be sure that everyone in Canada is making their decisions about this based on the facts and making their voice heard based on the facts.
Some have said that this process could take many, many years to culminate, and it could end up in legal and political battles. Are you ready to take on what this could do for Canada's national unity?
This is an unprecedented process. The law lays it out as a multi-year process. I do think that it's so important for us to remember two things as we work on this together. The first is how important pensions are to Canadians, how important the CPP is to the security that Canadians have, that we know there's going to be something for us at the end of the day when we retire, and how well the CPP works. You know, the CPP, and many ministers said this, it is the envy of the world. It is one of the crown jewels of the financial infrastructure that underpins our country. It underpins our AAA credit rating because it is well funded. So we have something really strong, really effective that all of us rely on. And we have to always bear that in mind as we work on this issue. The second thing that is really, really important, as your question suggests, is to remember that Canada is best when we work together, and to remember what a great country Canada is. We will have differences, and we do have differences. All of us have an obligation to try really hard to focus on the areas where we agree and to advance the national interest there. And where we disagree, as we do, and we always have and we always will, to try to make those disagreements, to deal with those disagreements in a way that respects the interests and the needs of all Canadians. That's the approach that our government will always take, that I will always take.
All right, Federal Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland there speaking to reporters following a meeting with her provincial counterparts today. She says disagreements were had. She also talked about Alberta's proposal to withdraw from the CPP, the Canada Pension Plan. That was really the focus of this meeting. Freeland calling it amid concerns about the ramifications of Alberta leaving the federal retirement plan. She says the action would be complicated, unprecedented, and it would put the program at great risk for millions. Another big headline, the finance minister also says there will be no more changes to the home heating oil carbon pricing policy. This after the changes were criticized for being divisive and for not helping all Canadians.